So Klipsch made some party speakers. That's easy enough to see, but are these Klipsch speakers that know how to party, or just party speakers wearing the Klipsch name? Let's find out. What's up, friends? I'm Brian MacDuff, aka BMAC, and welcome to another video. So yes, as you can see, Klipsch dropped a new line of party speakers, the Music City party speakers, in a Vegas size, Miami size, and a New York size. And if you know anything about Klipsch, you know that they know how to make quality speakers, but party speakers, in general, are a completely different animal. So are these Music City speakers bringing that real Klipsch DNA into a party speaker, or are they just your typical party speaker wearing the Klipsch name? That is what we're gonna discuss. First things first, a huge thank you and shout out to Klipsch for sending out their Music City party speakers for me to be able to check out. So Klipsch, thank you. But since these Music City party speakers look ready to party, let's start things out by talking about their design and whether or not these speakers are actually built for real parties, or if going bigger here starts to create some real world compromises. Like I mentioned earlier, the Klipsch Music City party speakers do come in 3 different sizes at the time of this filming. The Vegas, the smallest speaker, is surprisingly just under 18 pounds, and then the Miami jumps to over 40 pounds, while the New York jumps to just over 56 pounds. The Vegas is just about 1.5 feet tall, the Miami just over 2 feet, and the New York just over 2.5 feet. And in terms of build, I have to say all 3 speakers feel solid. They do have a plastic enclosure, but they have a metal front grille, and they do not feel cheap and could probably handle getting thrown around and banged up a little bit, especially since you're likely bringing these with you places because of their portability. The Vegas is light, and it certainly is small enough for you to be able to just one-hand it if you want to throw it into your car or just pop it up onto a table, and it does come with a nice heavy-duty handle integrated into the back of the top. The Miami has a built-in retractable handle, the only one of the 3 speakers that has one, and I found that that handle alone made the Miami the easiest to actually wheel around and bring with you. I do wish the wheels were just a little bit bigger, and I wish they were just a little further apart for added stability, but as long as you're wheeling slow, and as long as you're using that retractable handle, I've actually found it the easiest of the 3 to bring around. The New York, on the other hand, isn't all that much bigger. It's a little bit bigger, but it is certainly harder to wheel around. It does have the same heavy duty handle built into the back of the top, just like the Vegas and the Miami, but it does not have that retractable handle like the Miami has. I think the idea here was that the New York speaker is tall enough that you could probably just grab onto that handle and wheel it around while still having a lower center of gravity. But since it is the most expensive speaker in the lineup, I don't think that the cheaper Miami should actually be the more portable one and the easier to lug around one. In my testing of these speakers over the last several weeks, I definitely found myself wishing that the New York had that same retractable handle that the Miami had, because it's just such a game changer. I really do love that retractable handle. All 3 speakers do have a little storage slit on top of the device for placing your connected device, helpful for if you're listening hardwired or just want a place to put your phone. And in terms of drivers, the Vegas offers a single 5¼ inch woofer plus a 1-inch tweeter, while the Miami has 2 5¼ woofers and a 1-inch tweeter, while the New York has 2 8-inch woofers and the 1-inch tweeter. But I do want to point out that the Miami and the New York do also feature Tractrix flared front ports, which helps move around more air throughout the cabinet for more low-end extension that we'll be talking about more in just a few minutes. You get rubberized feet on the bottom of all 3 speakers, plus on the sides of all 3 speakers, which allows for quick and easy upright or side listening, which is actually quite helpful when we're going to be talking about stereo music listening here, again, in just a few minutes. All 3 speakers are IPX4 rated, so they'll be fine with a few splashes around a pool or at a backyard party, but they are not speakers I'd leave out in the heavy rain or treat like they're fully waterproof. All 3 speakers do also have the same control buttons and knobs on top for controlling your lighting, input source, Bluetooth pairing, speaker linking, volume, track control, and ultra bass toggling. Plus dedicated microphone control knobs for controlling your volume, bass, treble, and echo, along with some party speaker sound effects like an air horn, vinyl scratch, and even an applause cheer. Truthfully, I don't know that we needed a dedicated light control knob on top. I'd probably be willing to just adjust all my lighting modes and settings from right within the companion app, and I'd probably prefer a dedicated guitar volume knob there instead, but more on that later. And I guess now that we're talking about it, I'll also admit that the sound effects buttons are probably a little gimmicky. You cannot overlap them, you cannot customize them. I honestly don't really know when you'd actually use them. They definitely feel more like an extra little add-on than a major reason why these speakers stand out. And I would not be surprised if I never use those sound effects buttons again. The speakers are only available in a single color right now, that being a black enclosure, which I'm actually totally fine with. So all in all, from a design perspective, they seem well designed, albeit not quite perfect. So now let's talk about connectivity, because a party speaker is only as useful as how easily you can connect to them, plug them in, and actually link them together. So do these Music City party speakers actually deliver on the party speaker promise? All three Klipsch Music City party speakers do support Bluetooth 5.2 and the SBC audio codec. There is no support for a high resolution Bluetooth audio codec like LDAC, which usually isn't much of an issue in party speakers at $500 or less. But for the price, especially for the Miami or the New York, I do think that those speakers probably should have supported it, especially since other party speakers in this price range readily do. The Vegas speaker is in mono, but the Miami and the New York are actually in stereo, with the left channel being the top woofer and the right channel being the bottom, which may actually entice you to lay the speakers on their side for side listening if you wanted a little bit more of that left and right channel separation, since that's how you will listen in stereo. You do have the ability of actually pairing two of the same model speakers together for a TWS setup for a true left and right stereo setup, although I wasn't fully able to test that because I only have one speaker of each model. However, you do have a pretty cool party link mode where you could link multiple Music City party speakers together in mono, so that if you have mixing and matching models like I do, you can still listen to all three at once, all synced together. And overall, I thought the party link mode worked pretty well. It was pretty easy to get going, and it's an awesome way to spread sound around a larger space if you have several speakers covering a larger gathering, for instance. But I will say that the speakers weren't perfectly in sync. I did notice an ever so slight delay between the host speaker and the connected speakers. If you're using the speakers together in the party link mode and they're spread out around a yard or a larger party space, for example, I don't think most people are going to hear it or even care. But if they are a little closer together, that is where you might notice a little bit more of that slight latency between the host speaker and the connected speakers, which is a little surprising. And the same actually goes for the lighting. The lighting syncs up when you have party link mode turned on, which is what's going on here. I think it's awesome. And with lighting effects within the Klipsch companion app, there are numerous lighting effects to choose from. You could pick a specific color, you could even pick a secondary color. And one thing I thought was pretty cool is that the Klipsch logo on the side of the speakers also has LED lighting backing. You can turn that off if you want, but I think it's pretty cool. So you have more than just your typical woofer lined lights here. You also have the Klipsch name on the side, all of which syncs up together. It's pretty cool lighting that I like. You do also have two 1/4-inch inputs in a sealed off compartment on the back of all three speakers for microphone and musical instrument connections, with all three speakers actually coming with a microphone, by the way, which is a nice little touch. Back there, you do also have a dedicated mic gain knob and a musical instrument volume knob, along with aux in and aux out, and a USB-A port that puts out around 10 watts of power if you ever need to charge up a connected device from the internal speaker battery. One thing I do need to address though is the pretty perceivable latency that you're gonna experience when you're connecting a musical instrument and or a microphone to any of these speakers. It gets the job done and it's manageable, but if you're a professional music performer, you'll almost immediately notice the slight latency between your playing and the speaker playing your sound, probably because of internal processing. So even though you have those 1/4-inch mic and instrument inputs and pretty solid control over them, the latency is noticeable enough that I would be careful about relying on these speakers for any kind of live musical performances. If you're gonna use these speakers as just a PA speaker where you're just announcing something on a microphone, probably no issue whatsoever there. You're probably not even gonna notice the slight latency. But if you are a musical performer, it's almost so perceivable when you get into it that I probably would not recommend these specifically for musical performers. There is also a Klipsch companion app on iOS and Android that lets you see pretty much everything you would want to see with these speakers, including, of course, battery life, being able to adjust your volume, quick mute, change your input, control playback, adjust the equalizer, toggle ultra bass, play the built-in sound effects, customize lighting effects and colors, or even set up speaker pairing, which I did find to be easier to set up through the app rather than with the dedicated buttons on the speakers themselves. All in all, you've got most of your bases covered as it relates to connectivity here with these speakers. There may be a few missing features and I still would not necessarily recommend them for musical performances, but overall, it's a solid connectivity offering here in the Klipsch Music City Party lineup. But of course, the real test is probably with sound quality, because this is where the Klipsch name has the most to prove. Do these speakers actually sound like Klipsch speakers? or are they just good party speakers? The very first thing I realized with these speakers is that they are not like my other favorite Klipsch speakers, such as the 9s, which I adore. So they're not gonna be your 9s with wheels, lights, and a battery slapped inside. But at the same time, I don't think these speakers are trying to be that. They're portable, punchier, bassier, and clearly tuned to make music feel big and fun. And once you accept that, the lineup makes sense. When it comes to the three of them, the New York is probably the bass monster, the Miami is probably the sound quality sweet spot, and the Vegas is the surprise. The New York is the biggest and most powerful of the three, clearly, so therefore it gets the loudest, has the most bass, and if you listen to a lot of EDM, hip hop, or anything bass heavy, this is the speaker with the most wow factor. The ultra bass feature that all three speakers have also does probably make the biggest difference on the New York. It's available on the Miami and the Vegas, but it's more subtle on those speakers. On the New York, if you turn it on, you could actually hear it making a pretty large impact in the impactfulness of the low end, and it's the one I noticed ultra bass being the most prominent on. Indoors, listening loud, I had this thing set to around 70% volume, and there was definitely still a lot more room left in the tank to crank this thing even further. If there's any trade-off here with the New York, I think it's that the vocals could sit a little bit more recessed because the bass can become so dominant. So because of that, the New York is definitely the most fun speaker in the lineup, but not necessarily the most balanced. So that is where the Miami comes into play, and the Miami, like I mentioned, is probably the speaker that sounds the most balanced and hits you with the sound quality sweet spot. It does not have the same kind of deep and as hard-hitting bass as the New York, but I do think it has slightly better performance, better separation, and to me, it sounded strongest right out of the box before EQ. So if the New York is the speaker that I would pick to make the party feel bigger, the Miami is the one that I probably would pick to keep the sound more balanced. So then there's the little Vegas up here, and this little guy is actually the speaker that probably surprised me the most. It's clearly the smallest speaker in the lineup, so unsurprisingly, it has the least amount of bass and low end extension, but for its size and especially for its weight, I think it sounds way better than I expected it to. It gets pretty loud, has pretty good clarity, and sounds way bigger than it probably feels when you pick it up, and that's what impressed me the most. Having said that, it's obviously also the most limited. The ultra bass feature, like I mentioned earlier, is almost imperceptible on the Vegas. Vocals can sound a little bit more recessed, and with bass heavy tracks, I did notice a little bit more compression in this speaker past around 75% volume. So the Vegas is not a speaker that's meant to compete with the Miami or the New York, but for a smaller room or a more casual setup, it is much better than I thought it would be. Out of the box, none of the speakers sounded bad, but they can sound a little flat, which actually makes sense considering the default name of their default EQ profile is flat. So personally, I boosted the bass, carefully lifted the treble, and sometimes pulled the mids back just a little bit more for some of that V-shaped party speaker sound that I was looking for. Just don't crank the treble too much on the Miami or the New York because the horn-loaded tweeters can get a little harsh, especially in the vocals, if you push them too far. I did briefly compare all the speakers when plugged in and when on battery power, and there was no difference in terms of the performance that I could hear. And from what I understand, this makes sense because there is no processing or power difference with the speaker processing, whether it's on battery power or plugged in. The one audio downside here that I do need to discuss, however, has to be Bluetooth. Like I mentioned earlier, Bluetooth audio codec support here is limited to just SBC, and I really wish Klipsch introduced high resolution Bluetooth audio codec support like with the LDAC audio codec, or in the very least, supporting AAC. Over Bluetooth, I definitely noticed some artifacting and some muddier instrument separation, but when I plug these babies in over aux using a DAC, the artifacting basically disappeared, the vocals separated better, and details in general, like the hi-hats of certain songs, just came through much more cleanly. To be fair, wired sounding better than Bluetooth is not shocking, of course, but on more premium party speakers like these from Klipsch, that limitation with it being just the SBC audio codec for Bluetooth did leave me a little disappointed. So I do think that Bluetooth holds these speakers back just a little bit. Not enough to ruin them, because most people are still gonna use them wirelessly at parties and have a great time and not even realize what audio codec they're using, but the hardware seems capable of much cleaner sound than the SBC audio codec gives you, so maybe just keep that aux cable nearby. And that's the real tension with this lineup. There's clearly Klipsch flavor here, but the party speaker side is still driving a lot of the experience. But of course, all of the sound quality only matters as long as the battery life can keep up. So how long can you actually expect to keep the party going with them? The Vegas has a 4,400 milliampere hour battery, while the Miami and the New York have 5,000 milliampere hour batteries. According to Klipsch's own tech specs, you should be able to get up to 8 hours with the lights on or 12 hours with the lights off on the Vegas and the New York, or up to 10 hours with the lights on, or 18 hours with the lights off on the Miami. And all three speakers should only take around 2.5 hours to fully charge up. Now, I couldn't personally find any documentation on what volume level those battery life numbers are rated for, but to be honest, just with general use of all three of these speakers in my experience, battery has been one of the actual stronger real-world parts of my testing, especially, again, considering how loud and powerful and bass-heavy these speakers can get. I used the New York at an event starting at probably around 70% volume, and I ran it for several hours. And then I even did more testing, indoor testing when I got home, and the thing still had like 30% battery left in the tank. Same kind of situation with the Vegas and the Miami, so battery life never became something that I was worried about in my use. I am kind of surprised, however, to once again seeing the Miami kind of giving the more expensive New York a little bit of a run for its money. The Miami has the same battery as the New York, but I'm assuming because of its smaller woofer sizes, it actually gets better overall battery life. Not exactly something I was expecting with a lower price speaker in this lineup. So once again, the Miami is making a case here for it being a pretty darn good speaker in its spot in this lineup. So with all this having been said, are the Klipsch Music City party speakers Klipsch speakers that know how to party, or just party speakers wearing the Klipsch name? Bottom line, the Klipsch Music City party speakers are definitely party speakers first, but good ones. They may not sound like my beloved Klipsch the 9s on wheels. Bluetooth certainly holds them back a little bit. The sound effects feel a little bit gimmicky, and because of the input latency issues, I would not necessarily treat these speakers as a first choice for live musical performers. But as battery-powered party speakers, this lineup makes sense. These are not your traditional Klipsch hi-fi speakers that are gonna blow your mind on sound quality alone. They are Klipsch-flavored party speakers, and as party speakers, I think they do deserve to be taken seriously. Bottom line, if you want the biggest bass, go with the New York. If you want the best balance, go with the Miami. And if you want the most portable option with the lowest price tag, go for the Vegas. Just judge them for what they are, not hi-fi speakers, but very capable party speakers with enough Klipsch DNA to make them interesting. As always, for the latest deals, prices, promos, and information for the Klipsch Music City party speakers, you could of course always head to my affiliate link, bmac.link/musiccityparty, or of course, as always, there will be clickable links in the video description box and in the comment section below, so check those out. And with that having been said, I honestly think I have enough party speaker power here to host a gigantic block party. I should do that. Use all my speakers together, demonstrate them, the BMAC bash. Might have to look into that. I will see you guys in my next video.